This is Real Talk, the Customer Insights Show with Jenn Vogel. Join Jenn and her guests for this live discussion around topics that will help you understand your customers better. Also available on podcast channels. This live stream is presented to you by Vox PopMe, the leader in video research. Here's today's live conversation.
Hello, insights professionals, marketers, and everyone who wants to understand their customers better. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Real Talk, the Customer Insights Show. We're live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and several other channels, YouTube, and the podcast version will be available on podcast channels later this week. Good customer experience certainly includes good customer service, a useful and easy to use product, and customer-led product updates. We've talked about many of those topics on previous episodes. And today I want to dive into the importance of content optimization and testing to create the best possible customer experience. So to discuss the topic, today I'm joined by Bianca Pryor, Vice President of Consumer Insights at BET, where she leads content optimization and describes herself as a tester of all the things, talent, pilot, series, and promos. Welcome to today's episode, Bianca.
Thank you, Jen. So glad to be here. I'm excited for our discussion and to give a different slant to the conversation.
Me too. I'm really excited to dig in today. And so before we really get into the topic of content optimization, a question that we ask all of our guests: from your experience, how has the role of consumer insights evolved in companies recently?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm going to answer it a couple ways. So first, from the angle of traditional consumer insights departments, and then secondly, from the angle of demand side. So when you think about the history of traditional consumer insight departments, they are morphing. They are morphing very rapidly. We all know this, especially those who have been on the vendor side or supply side. And what you see is a morphing of consumer insights into marketing, data analytics, data strategy. And we're seeing a lot of these departments' DNA being shared. So I remember back in my supply side days, we would go pitch one team capabilities, right? And then a couple months later, if we won the business, we would be talking to an entirely different team, or it would be made up differently, simply for the fact that, organizations are constantly reevaluating how they're shaped. I would also say, from a demand side standpoint, if you think about what are end clients actually asking for when it comes to research, and one of the biggest trends that I saw for my System 1 days is that we are seeing a little less need for brand tracking, brand health, and a lot more on the innovation and advertising side. So if you kind of think and really sit with that, the nature of each practice area or pillar, branding is inherently a lot of data collection. It requires, you're distributing this knowledge weekly, monthly, quarterly, that sort of thing. And innovation and advertising, you're pushing new ideas. There's a little bit of pass fail in there. You have to provide those implication and recommendations. So you're really moving from librarian to strategic consultant. So that is the ask. And the ask is really to grow your brand's profits and not just be a librarian and report back data points.
That's really interesting. So, what you're saying about there being kind of less of a need for that ongoing brand tracking, that, always on, is that a result of that just not being needed? Or is it more about the practices and the methodologies? I mean, brand tracking surveys have been historically, exhausting and, unable to be changed because of the, historic data. Is it that we need to evolve that practice, or is it that, we have less of a need for that information?
I think we need to evolve the practice, and we have to really make it quicker, more agile, all the buzzwords that we hear in our industry. And we really need to honor that. And we need to think about how we can service our end clients and get them to a much quicker place for insights.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then to what you were saying about innovation and advertising, there are methods that are very agile right now, and that meets the need of, getting those answers quickly, but that more kind of always on is a little bit more challenging.
For sure.
Yeah. And So how do, in your role, like viewers and customers play a role in kind of the changes that are happening in the industry?
Yeah, sure. So how we think about our customers here at BET, those customers are our fans. They are our viewers who's showing up for our TV shows, for our streaming content, even for our live events or even our festivals. So I like to think about it. These are our customers who want to watch us, listen to us, and read about us. And we're distributing content in many different ways. So it might be on linear TV. So that is what we call a simply cable TV. So if you have a Optimum or Time Warner cable package, you'll find BET on there. Then there's BET Plus. So that is our SVOD or our streaming platform that we have. And we're pretty fortunate to have one of those under the Viacom CBS umbrella. So there's Nick, Noggin has one, as well as Paramount Plus that just aired or just launched rather, and as well as Pluto TV. So then if you kind of get into like the social stuff, we have social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, presence there. We're also tapping into news. We have a news point of view, as well as award shows and live events, as I had shared. So a lot of different kind of content need states to deliver against.
Yeah, this has got to be such an interesting time to work in this kind of vertical because it's so different than it was, 10 or 15 years ago where you described it as the linear TV. Like we just had cable, I think about how I was consuming content as a child and the difference with like my kid who's like, can we watch this show right now for 7 hours? Like, yes, we can, you don't have to wait a week for a new episode, but there's just so many additional channels and additional methods of consuming that content. And as a result, like so much more volumes of content, like that's a huge mountain to tackle. And in terms of, determining what people want to consume, where and how, and their satisfaction with that content.
Completely. And as someone once put it to me here, we always have to feed the beast, in terms of research and consumer insights. We constantly have to feed that so that they can create sharper content for our fans and viewers.
Yeah, that's really super interesting. Okay, so we're gonna that was just the intro, guys. Strap in. This is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah.
So in terms of content optimization, like you lead the content optimization team. Maybe first just tell a little bit about the setup of the team, and kind of the origination of it.
Yeah, sure. So the way I like to explain it is you can think of the consumer insights team here at BET as a giant bubble, and within the bubble there's 3 distinct bubbles. So one is the content optimization and marketing strategy, so that's the team I lead. There's an ad sales research bubble, and then there's more like a data strategy bubble, and we all work together within this bubble for the greater good of consumer. The structure actually predates me, but it's not foreign actually to any other TV networks. If you went to NBC or if you went to Univision, they may have similar setups as well too. So I like to search as almost those who service the external stakeholders. So very akin, when I think of that parallel, it reminds me of my vendor side days, where they are providing the insights, maybe even doing a little pitching to the brands and providing that research and insight, why they should air on BET. So that's the ad sales research group. So then you have the content team. So I like to think of that as, we're servicing those internal stakeholders. So the head of scripted, the head of unscripted, the marketing team, digital team, even social impact. And I tell you, like last year, we were doing so much work with the social impact team. So we were spending a lot of time researching things that were happening in with COVID, unemployment among the Black community. So tons of stuff there. So, and I think it's no different actually than market research, right? Where we kind of are always thinking in our minds, geolocating. Like if you think about it, if you're at TMRE or one of these big conferences, you're like, oh, vendor side or client side? You're placing people, right? Oh, are you a quali? Are you a quanti? do you are innovation or brand and respect, where you kind of are separating, ad sales research with content, between content?
That's interesting. And I love how you describe the different, basically you've all got customers, whether those are your internal customers or your external customers that you need to serve. Like, I think the insights function in general, we're very rarely doing research for our own benefit, right? Like, this is for to meet a particular business need or to answer a question that someone else has in the business, and navigating that is, it's a lot, actually.
Yeah, it is a big old ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, totally. Things that you were testing just in terms of mindsets amongst viewers or people in general about the pandemic, things like that. But I'm sure there are definitely times when you're asking very specific questions and others that are maybe a little bit more broad. So in that variety of things that you're testing, what's how do you identify like the best method for a specific project, or the goals that you're trying to achieve with your research?
Yeah, and as you hit on, Jen, earlier, my team is testing so much, and again, we're the tester of things, so some type of stimuli. So just to clarify, I'm talking about a log line, maybe a show Bible, a pilot positioning. We could even test celebs or key art. So I think it fundamentally goes back to, what is the business objective? What are we trying to learn? Are we trying to move the needle on, tune in? Are we trying to move the needle on our total addressable market? So really going back to, what is the business objective, and making sure you design an appropriate piece of research with the measures within that to get to that answer. And I'd say a few ways where this kind of lives or manifests is, maybe we're helping to inform a marketing brief. Maybe it's to drive an entire initiative, within the business. So the example I gave earlier about social impact, we're doing a lot of that work to get a real handle on what's happening in the Black community with the double pandemic. So I think it's particularly helpful that I actually have this vendor side, supply side hat, because I think it really gives me that sixth sense to really figure out, what is the best approach, and applying the active listening, tapping into my expertise, having worked across thousands of clients in many different categories. You start to hear similar questions, and I can more easily map it back to the business objective and say, oh, okay, like I've heard this before. So this would be more exploratory. So I would execute qual, or this is actually something that needs validation. So I'm going to raise a piece of quant. And sometimes my favorite projects are mixed methodology, when you get to bring them both together. And one last bit, I would just throw in here is that I think sometimes in the industry, there's a myth that clients have deep pockets, and that is not always true. Like we very much do have to think about timing and budget as well. Like, it doesn't go away just because, you're on the brand or client side. And that can impact final methodology. So there have been many instances where, as much as I would love to do, work with an external vendor or something, the show may not have the marketing budget behind it, or the promotion or whatever to merit something so expensive. And so we do have to think about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that speaks to what we were saying earlier about agile, and there's certainly a decision point that has to happen of, when do we need to be agile and move quickly and be scrappy and do research at low cost, and when can we invest a little bit more? And I'm sure that decision point comes on a daily basis of, prioritizing where you can use your limited resource, both time, energy, cost, to, support a business objective.
Exactly.
And so, what, I guess, in terms of the different methodologies, like you mentioned, sometimes you're going to be leaning on qual and sometimes on quant. And, what role do kind of the different methodologies play, whether that be quant surveys or video or, any of those other methodologies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this question. I spend a lot of time thinking about the approach and how it should feel natural to the business once it's squarely in. So, BET, it's media and entertainment, and I think video surveys play a really, really great role in that. When I think of CPG, my mind goes to virtual shelf sets, right? When I think of fintech, I think of UX and someone doing that type of research. So I think video surveys definitely has a home in media entertainment, and more so in the times that we're in, right? So we can still get to the heart of the matter through video, through conversation, but in the comfort of people's homes, or if they're on the run and in the go. And people love to talk about TV. I can't tell you. They love playing executive producer, and they get really into it. I'm talking like where the set should be, or what kind of music, or the characters and how they've developed. And they're honest, whether they like something or don't like something in a show, we get to hear it all. So I think the beauty of video technology is it allows us to capture the verbal as well as like the nonverbal as well too.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally relate to that. Like the content that we consume, especially over the last year, it's become, I think TV's always been a big part of people's lives, right? But all of a sudden it was like we weren't allowed to be outside. Yeah. So the only thing we had to talk about was what was the last, show you binged over the weekend. And, and people do feel so passionately about it. There is some there's some escape in it. There's some comfort in it. Like there is a therapy in the content that we consume. So people feel so passionately about what they like and don't like. And I can only imagine like how that comes through in video research or any kind of qual.
Completely. And I'd love to share an example. It's actually, we experimented with your video survey solution, and it was for in the unscripted TV space. So meaning there's no script, it's typically reality. And it was for a specific TV subgenre. And the question really was, coming from the top was, did our audience, which is African-American 18 to 49, did our audience want this type of subgenre? Yeah. And through your video survey, we found that it was a resounding yes. Like everybody who, did their videos and answered the questions and provided the insights were so into it. And what we found is that there was a huge white space that was presented, and that we actually, no one in, cable TV or even broadcast was really cornering this market, for the Black audience. And the ideas they were kicking back to us actually had a common theme of Black empowerment. And like, wow, like this subgenre would be really great for our community. And it felt like, it would have been culturally responsive if BET, came up with something, a show like that. So I loved that your Vox Pop Me video surveys did that. So thank you.
Yeah, it's great. And yet, like you said, it's that, you could probably find out that this was something of interest through a quant survey, and how people describe what that would mean to them is where the real power comes in and the real benefit comes in.
Exactly. And all the expressions, the eyes lighting up, the searching from the corner of their eyes, the gestures, you could really pick up on that through the approach.
I love that. I love hearing that. So, and then what about concept testing? Do you test concepts, or at what stage does the research come in? I'm sure this is again about talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, happy to. So we do test concepts, just like in the NPD world or animatics, like if you're in the ad testing world. And in the media world, they come as loglines. So I'll give you an example. So I don't know if any of you watched the It's So Bad, It's So Good, a series called You. It's a thriller series on Netflix with Penn Badgley.
Yes.
Okay. I loved it.
I did too.
And the log line is simply quote, a dangerously charming, intensely obsessive young man goes to extreme measures fixed by. That is a log line. So something like 1 to 2 sentences, snappy, that you might see if you're scrolling Netflix. So we're testing quite a bit of those.
Mhm.
We'll test positioning. So not all that different from, if you're doing something for a brand. We test show pilots. We test scripts. Scripts are harder to do. And just because, you don't want to put 100 pages of script in front of your fans or your viewers.
Mm.
And sometimes we test key art as well. So, a certain talent, or should you show the entire ensemble or just one person? So these are all the kinds of things that we're testing. I will say all of this is very much hinged to the fact, like, if we can get this from the studio,
Sure.
the entertainment companies, or our internal marketing teams in enough time to make impact. So I think this goes back to your really beautiful question earlier about, how do you know what approach to take? I think we also have to think about when we can get that stimuli as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's not a whole lot of concept testing that can be done without a concept, right?
There you go.
You are a little bit limited to what you have. So that makes a lot of sense. And then, how about kind of talking with customers? What role does that play in your process, and what methods are you using?
Yeah. So just, in terms of like, I think like broad strokes, we're always interested in the before. So before an idea, a show, a pilot. So again, all of these concepts, we're very much interested in keen understanding before something goes to air.
Mm.
We're also really keen to understand after something airs. So a really good example, all of our award shows. We just had a really big award show called the NAACP Image Awards on Saturday. And, our job, we know first thing on Monday is we need to do a post survey. And what happened? I think where my gears crank a little bit is I'm always trying to figure out, well, what can we do more upstream, right? Because if you can figure out what you can do upstream, then I think it has the potential to impact that moment, that event. And it creates that flywheel of insights going between before and after something airs, before and after. So, just in terms of actual tools and solutions to get into that a little bit more, we're always going to qualitative focus groups. So those are a lot of fun. We work with a great partner there who can do that. And we have a nice, good system going on. We do binge tests. So sometimes we'll have our fans sit and watch an entire series of a particular show if we want feedback, which is fun.
Yeah.
We'll do some light polling. We have an internal panel, so we're able to tap into that as well, which is nice. Online surveys, of course, we do loads of those. Video, which again, I want to really implement into our practice and do more of. We have our feet to the street when it comes to social media. That's not part of my team, but we certainly get those analytics as well too. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to bring together.
It is. And I forgot, a big area, which is ratings. So my team that doesn't sit in that bubble of consumer insights, but we're often referencing ratings. So did this show hit its intended rating? And rating is essentially the most important measure in the TV world of how many millions of people, ideally millions, and not just thousands of people showed up and tuned in for your show. So if you can nail your rating, that's powerful.
Yeah, for sure. This is a good segue because I want to learn a little bit more about the kind of bringing of all of that together and the collaboration that needs to happen. You already kind of talked about your bubble, but you also mentioned there's other networks on your, under the Viacom CBS umbrella, Nick and Noggin and others. And, you've got ratings teams, you've got the people within your bubble, like that's a lot of information and data living in a lot of different places. Like, how do you collaborate with the other insights folks at your company and for, some of those other brands and within your own teams?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to describe it is the Mocha Model. I don't know if our audience is familiar, but I'll just recap it. But MOCA stands for Manager, Owner, Consultant, Helper, and Approver. And I think it's a really slick, management model that just helps you think about how you show up in spaces, how you collaborate. And I would say when we're interacting with other business units and other teams, it's primarily because we value their expertise and we want them to come in as a consultant. And we love that because it just really makes for the project, the engagement, that much more top notch. And the other function I'd say is helper, so the H in MOCA. Sometimes we're asking our other business units to assist or sometimes do some of the work in whatever project we're engaging in. But you're exactly right. The ecosystem it's pretty gnarly. Like we could be working within BET, again, within all of these kind of 12 to 14 business units. It could be, if you're on the ad sales research side, it could be working with, other end brands, or we sometimes cross over the fence and work with Viacom CBS insights teams, as well as insights teams within the network, but mostly the C and the H in MOCA.
I love that. We have a similar, it's not the same acronym. It's a different acronym that we use at Vox Poppy, but it's really helpful in kind of, identifying clear roles and responsibilities among different teams and functions, and where do others want to be informed, and where do they want to be consulted, and when do I want to be consulted or informed? And it does really help to kind of build those bridges and collaborate cross-functionally. But I haven't heard the MOCA one. So now I'm like, I've got to do a little more digging on this and maybe change everything.
Right. Or you share yours with me.
Yeah, totally. Maybe there's some kind of blend that makes sense.
Right.
And so the other thing I wanted to ask, in terms of collaboration, so you and I met because you sit on the Insights Association board with our CEO, Dave. And so how does that kind of fit in with your approach for collaboration with the industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Insights Association it's so familiar to me. It feels like a big, warm, fuzzy blanket. I've been affiliated with IA since about 2015 or so. And it started off, presenting at different tracks. And now to be at a leadership level, it's so exciting, Jen. And again, working alongside Dave is great. But what I would say is that it's giving me a through line. So being on the national board, serving on the IDEA Council, which stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, and leading at BET, it just works so nicely because now, especially for the IDEA Council work that we're doing, I'm able to share a very clear point of view about Black viewers, Black fans, or, the Black community, which I know is really important, a key priority for the work we're doing with IDEA Council. And I know the issue. We know this issue. And so it just kind of goes back and forth, and there's just like a nice relationship of points of view there. And I love too that, with Insights Association, or just our industry in general, we're chipping away on the gender front. Like I've seen that happen. It's amazing. So now the work to be done is on the racial equity front, and then moving on to other. So again, it gives me a much sharper point of view. In fact, last week I was on a panel on just sample. Like we were nerding out on sample. And it took me all the way back to my TNS Kantar days where I was building like sample and all this super fun, nerdy stuff. But what it did for me, like in sitting with that experience, it got me in a real sample mindset. And it actually started to get me thinking about what we can do at BET better, how I can push my, panel and sample partners as well. So I think that back to like being a part of IA and collaboration, it's just been really nice to just be in like the right frame of mind with regard to the industry.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love hearing about the work that's coming out of the Insights Association. You guys, it does make a lot of sense that, with this, the work you're doing at BET and the IDEA Council, like fitting so seamlessly together. Because as you mentioned earlier, the research you're doing isn't only limited to content and, you know, the different types of testing that you're doing, but really mindset and, you know, how are people feeling? And that piece of it is so important too. And it helps to shape business decisions and answer some of those questions, but also, you know, probably is really beneficial for the Insights Association to hear your perspective, because you're really in there and trying to under questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. This has been really fun.
Really fun. Thank you for everyone who is listening in. Please rate and review us on your favorite network. And don't forget to share the show with your friends. In the next episode, I'll be joined by Tara Robertson from Teamwork, and I will see you then. Bye.
Bye.